All right, we're showing that now.
And how do you advance them on this one? On the map?
Yeah.
That one?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Elizabeth, tell me when I say go. This is how you advance.
Okay.
Right here.
Perfect. Make it what I think in there.
Yeah.
And then, okay, perfect.
And so that goes.
And then, is there a speaker or anything?
Yeah, there's. She said through the computer. It's already recording.
For here.
Oh.
That's okay. I can just turn around.
Standal.
Yeah, I'm confused now. I am not.
Oh, it's Standal.
Yeah.
You can hear this.
Good.
In a minute. And then I'll over here, and then I'm gonna go back there and probably Logan you want to but see, I didn't do my presentation yet, just so you know. So I have no idea if I have time, but you can make fun of me later.
Totally fine.
What you do? It's 7 in the morning.
Are you going to be like right down there?
I'm going to be standing there. We'll go up to the back so that we're not taking it. Unless there's
Up here with me.
I again have to hear me.
Yeah, you want to see me?
So I will.
I'll figure it out.
Here we go. Oh, okay. We're going to get started now. I think everybody's enjoyed some food, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am President Jordan. I'm a clinical information librarian here, and I am a member of the Community Senate. And so on behalf of the Professional Development Committee, we'd like to welcome others to communication on sleep wellness. We had a lot of people donate stuff today, which was wonderful. So I kind of like to recognize them. Oh, really? I think you're going to really want to applaud this man. He brought the food.
Hey, food brings people, so it's good to be here this sunny cold day. Enjoy the rest of the day.
But with the food, we had a great last-minute addition to our team on the P&A, which is Steve. And Steve brought the Coke.
Yeah.
Yay!
I would have come and reminded you of your days down the wire. We still haven't.
Different, so anybody who's here with us can give us their email. Everybody who registered and is on the can send us their email. We have drawings for prizes for this one. I've donated prizes, so we'll be sending those out also. And I did want to recognize the library and the residents. We have residents here and librarians in the back answering questions. on sleep for you and highlighting some of the resources that I'll talk about later that we have here at the university. But so thank everybody. Everybody contributed to this. We're going to introduce our two speakers. We have Dr. Stephanie Standal, and she is right on faculty here. And she has an interest in sleep medicine, and so she'll be doing most of the presentation. We want to welcome her. And then we also have Dr. Logan McCool, and he is actually presented on sleep and stroke rehabilitation. So he's a resident here, so he's going to sum up everything for us, and then I'll be here to talk about resources. So we'll get started with Stephanie.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's not very often that I get to speak in front of this type of an audience, so I'm really pleased to be able to share with you what I know about sleep. So first I want to start off by just polling the audience. So who in here feels as though they get enough sleep? Anyone? Okay. Connie, I'd like to give a few prizes to our people who get enough sleep. We actually do have a few. So also by a show of hands, who in here feels as though they don't get enough sleep? Okay, and who wishes that they got more sleep? Okay, so I think it's probably the general consensus that we as a whole are just not getting enough sleep. So the question is, how much sleep do we actually really need? Now I think it's no surprise we all hear about the recommended 8 hours of sleep, right? And actually that guideline has been pretty unchanged for a while. And it's actually a recommendation by the National Sleep Foundation, and they update their sleep guidelines every year. So the most recent guideline is right here on this graph, and so it essentially shows that the amount of sleep that's recommended in adolescents or people under the age of 18, it varies quite a bit, and I think that's no secret. I mean, we know that infants need more sleep than a preschooler versus an 18-year-old. But one thing that I want to point out here is that according to this graph, the recommendation beyond 18 years really doesn't change. So whether you're 18 years of age or 85, the recommendation is on average 8 hours of sleep a night. And so in the dark blue, you see it says the recommended, which is 7 to 9 hours, and that's kind of what I'm going to be focusing on. But then you can see there's kind of a maybe appropriate range, and that's for the people that you know. Some people just simply need more, or they just simply need less. And a good way to kind of gauge how much sleep you actually need is go to bed one night on a weekend night, and don't set an alarm. And however much sleep you ended up getting is probably about how much you needed, assuming that you weren't incredibly sleep deprived the week leading up to that. So how much sleep are we actually getting as a whole? So there's been several studies done on how much sleep we get in the U.S. And this is a really hard thing to study very accurately because you'd have to hook up everyone to a sleep monitor, essentially, to get a really accurate number and quality. So most of the studies that you'll see on how much sleep we're getting is based on self-reports. So this first one is a study that was done in 2005 through 2008, and it basically just polled members of the U.S. and asked, it was several 100,000 people that they polled, and they just asked, how much sleep are you getting every night? And you'll see that in the middle right there is the 7-hour sleep duration. And then it was like your typical bell curve that you would expect. So some people are getting on average a lot more, and some people are getting a lot less. But I want to point out that below 7-hour sleep duration, that comprised at least more than a third of the population. So then they took that a step further, and this was a study done by the CDC in 2014, and they essentially assessed how much sleep we're getting by state. Because they wanted to see, are there any disparities amongst the states? And they found, and this is a little different the way they questioned, they made it actually a little bit simpler, in that they basically asked everyone, are you getting at least 7 hours of sleep or not? And it was a simple yes or no question. And what they found was that states did have quite a bit of a difference, as you can see, our state, Minnesota, people answered that in this study of over 400,000 people, about 70% of us were stating that we are getting over 7 hours of sleep. There are some states, and they tend to be grouped together, that are getting significantly less than 7 hours of sleep. About 50 to 60% are only reporting that they're getting over 7 hours of sleep. So why is that? Well, they found that there's quite a difference among race. We're finding that Black Americans are on average getting less sleep overall. We're finding that people who do shift work or overnight work are sleeping less as a whole. And then people who have really high stress jobs, they tend to sleep a lot less. You know, that might, I don't know how that really is different among the states. I would expect states, like California to be getting less sleep, but it was a little surprising to me, but that is what they found. So this study actually showed, it basically talked about the amount of sleep that we're getting across the years. And so what has been the trend of sleep since 1942? How does that compare to 2015? And essentially they found that on average, people were sleeping about an hour less since the early 1900s. And why is that? You know, we don't know. Could it be the technology? Could it be that higher demands on jobs? But there's a consistent trend that we've noticed since about the 1990s that we're getting on average at least an hour of sleep less. And this was just another study, and this looked at people who were actually sleep deprived. So this number here were people who were getting less than 6 hours of sleep per night. And as you can see, as the years go on from 1975 all the way to 2006, there is a significant increase in the amount of people that are reporting less than 6 hours of sleep per night. So that being said, I'm just going to be talking about the physiology of sleep a little bit, the importance of sleep. I'm going to debunk a few common myths about sleep, and then my colleague, Dr. McCool, is going to be talking about how we can optimize our sleep, and then clinical librarian Connie from Jorno is going to talk about where we can get resources about that. And pictures of the baby, yes, they're mine. That's my child. He's a lot older now, though. He's 2.5 now. So insufficient sleep is actually it's a public health concern. People are reporting that they're getting, we polled the audience. Most of you are reporting that you're probably not getting enough sleep. And that seems to be the trend among most Americans. They're not getting enough sleep. So what are we seeing as a consequence of this? Well, people are having a harder time concentrating, a more difficult time remembering things, working on things. They're reporting a significant difficulty with driving. And this is a big concern because 11% of people that were in these polls were reporting that they were having a difficult time either driving or staying awake while riding on public transportation. Reported that they could easily fall asleep while driving, and that's a concern. So 11% of us are driving around feeling like we could fall asleep. That's scary. If you know anything about sleep, or if you've heard anything about sleep, there's some physiology behind it. So there's this thing called circadian rhythm, and it's highly driven by the amount of light that we're exposed to. So during the day, we're exposed to more light, and our body secretes different hormones that are supposed to keep us up. As it gets darker and we're exposed to less light, our body starts to release melatonin. The later in the night, the more melatonin we secrete, and this drives our desire to fall asleep. There are different stages of sleep. So there's REM and there's non-REM. So REM standing for rapid eye movement. So within the different stages of sleep, there are different types as well. So we spend about a quarter of our night in REM sleep. And this is the regenerative, restful sleep where we're completely relaxed and we're dreaming. And this is kind of the goal for people, is to get an optimal amount of REM sleep at night. But there's other stages, and we kind of cycle between the stages throughout the night. So this is just some of the brain waves that are looking at a healthy 21-year-old and the type of what their sleep is doing throughout the night. So as you can see, they're starting on a wake stage, and they slowly dip down into stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 of sleep. There's a few times when they dip all the way down into REM sleep, and like I said, that tends to be about a quarter of the night. So this is really important, and so the reason we need to go through these stages of sleep is because it's really important for brain health, physical health, and our daytime performance. So sleep plays a big role on brain health. So throughout the night when we're sleeping, our brain is regenerating itself. This translates to better problem-solving abilities, better ability to learn. So when you're sleep deprived, it's much more difficult to study for a test, learn a new task, pick up on things that you're trying to learn for a job. We tend to be less creative when we're not well rested. You'll notice that attention span is a lot less. It plays a role on memory. So people that are sleep deprived tend to have a lot more difficulty with being able to remember just simple things that happened the day prior. And then it can play a really big role on mood. Who are to be less inhibited. They tend to be a little disinhibited, crabby, make decisions that they wouldn't normally make when they're not well rested. So what about physical health? So when we're sleeping, our body is secreting hormones that are responsible for growth in youth. And so we all know that before the age of 18, it's incredibly important that we're getting adequate sleep for growth. Also during sleep, our heart and blood vessels are repairing themselves. And so studies have found that people who are not sleeping adequately have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, renal disease, and stroke. And it's for this reason. In addition, when we're sleeping, this plays a big role on our body's ability to respond to insulin. And insulin is what lowers our blood sugar levels. And so people who are rested have glucose levels, and so this predisposes us to the risk of diabetes. In addition, sleep regenerates our hormones that cause satiety, and so when you get less sleep at night, you tend to have a more difficult time controlling weight. Also, all of the cells that are responsible for immune function tend to regenerate during sleep, and so people who don't sleep as much tend to get sick more often as well. So the question is there a longer lifespan associated with sleep? And it's not a simple answer. Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that we tend to be healthier when we're sleeping more. But I didn't put the graph up here, but there's actually been a lot of studies that show that people who sleep significantly less or significantly more tend to have a lower lifespan than people that are kind of more in the middle. So there's still a lot of research that needs to be done about sleep, and why is it that people that sleep more, you would think, well, if I'm sleeping 12 hours a night, shouldn't I live extra long? Well, that may not indeed be the case. But that also leads to the question, are they sleeping longer because there's other issues going on? So that's a factor.
I have an audio problem with those connecting
okay.
remotely. I apologize to interrupt you. I'm just going to put a reminder out to everyone connecting remotely. If you can please mute your computer or also your phone. There's a lot of background noise for our participants. And I think we should be able to mute them. If not, we already muted from here as well. excuse me 1 second while we your patience. 1 moment. I'll be in a second. Okay, thank you. Let me. Sorry about that. That's okay. Where is that one? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right, and just a reminder, if you're calling in by phone, please also make sure that you are not speaking into the receiver. I apologize for the interruption. Oh, okay. Thank you all for your patience.
Okay, so sleep also plays a big role on daytime performance and safety. So people who sleep more and sleep at least the recommended amount of sleep, which is 8 hours, tend to be more productive at work and tend to have fewer accidents, which leads to more safety. I think this is not a surprise to all of us. There's a concept that I wanted to point out, and it's something called micro, and it's something that I didn't know about until medical school, but it's something that a lot of people are aware of, and it's essentially when you're sleep deprived, and you might do something, for example, drive home or sit during a meeting, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, okay, I just got home, and I don't remember the drive home. It's possible that you could have been micro-sleeping. So essentially you're sleeping, but you're awake, and you're not really knowing what's going on, and it's a phenomenon that happens when you're severely sleep deprived. And they're finding people who research sleep are finding that this is a common phenomenon and something to be aware of. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few common myths about sleep. And the first one I kind of already addressed during my talk, and that is during sleep the brain is at rest. So this is actually false. I showed you this already, but I thought I would touch on it again. That this is an EEG waveform, and it's of somebody when they're sleeping. So the first line is a person when they're awake. This is what a waveform tends to look like when you're in an awake state. Now, during the different stages of sleep, the waveforms tend to change. You can see all the way down into stage 4, the waveforms are a lot different than when they're awake. But if you actually look at stage 5 of sleep, or REM sleep, you'll see that this is the waveform that actually looks the most similar to awake state. And so really one could argue that the brain, the state of REM sleep, the regenerative stage of sleep, looks very similar to being awake, and perhaps that's why we dream in REM sleep. Another common myth, lying in bed is just as good as sleeping. I was told this a lot when I was a kid, that just lay in bed, you'll be fine, it's just the same as sleeping. Well, this is in fact not true. So quiet wakefulness versus sleep is significantly different. Now there are some similarities when you're in this quiet wakefulness state, when you're laying down, you're relaxing, you're trying to fall asleep. Your muscles are relaxed. Your thoughts are relaxed. You're relaxed. But it's actually, like I said, the stages of REM sleep that are regenerative or restorative. And so, yes, it's good for you in that you're giving your body a rest, but really in order to get that rest that you really need to feel rejuvenated, you have to achieve some level of REM sleep. And so that is indeed false. Another common myth that I hear a lot, the older you are, the fewer hours of sleep you need. Now, a lot of people feel that this is true, and I think that one thing that we've all observed is that older people do tend to sleep less. But it's not because they need less sleep. That's something that I started to say kind of at the beginning. You need still 8 hours of sleep if you're 80 years old. It's that they have a much harder time falling asleep or staying asleep. Sleep disorders tend to be more common when you're older. So this is a graph that just kind of shows the overall trend of what happens throughout life with regards to REM and non-REM sleep. So as you can see, when you're older than 50, you tend to get significantly less REM sleep than people that are younger. And this is why people often feel less rested when they're older and just overall have more difficulties with sleep in general. The other thing that happens is a phase advance. This happens with age. And so people tend, when you're older, they tend to feel more of a need to fall asleep at an earlier time and wake up earlier. So this is what this graph kind of shows, that sleep will be often more broken up, and it'll start sometimes earlier and be not last quite as long. So that is also false. Another common myth is that alcohol before bed can help you sleep. This is partially true in that alcohol before bed can help you fall asleep. However, it does do a number to the quality of sleep that we get. And this is also true not just for alcohol, but for any type of medication like a muscle relaxant or like Benadryl. I don't know if any of you take some of that, like Advil PM or something. It has a similar effect to alcohol in that you might be able to fall asleep better. However, it plays a huge impact. It has a huge impact on your amount of REM sleep. And so it's the quality of sleep that you get that's affected by drinking alcohol before bed. So you might get just as many hours or more hours of sleep, but it's not going to be the restful sleep that you need. So this is a big one. Now that these sleep tracking devices are becoming more common, like the Fitbit and the Apple Watch. And that a myth is that sleep tracking devices are an accurate way to measure sleep quality and quantity. Again, this is a myth, but it's a partial myth. So there's actually there was a recent article that was published in the New York Times where Fitbit is actually in a lawsuit right now because there has been some studies that have shown that Fitbit is overestimating the amount of sleep that people are getting. They found that it overestimated by about 67 minutes a night, which is a big deal, you know that. And so their statement that they've said from day one is that we're not meant to be a medical device. And so I think that's just something that I would stress to you all is that, yes, I think it gives us an idea of what our sleep patterns tend to be, but it's not particularly accurate. Perhaps something that would be a more accurate of how well we're sleeping is how we feel the next morning. That, to me, that's overall the best way to measure what type of sleep you're getting. Okay, this is also a partial myth. Screen time before bed reduces sleep quality. So the partial myth is that no, it does not reduce sleep quality, but it can make it much more difficult to fall asleep if you're looking at a screen before bedtime. And that's because of what we talked about earlier in the circadian rhythm. You're exposing your eyes to light. Light is causing cortisol and other hormones that are trying to wake you up. And so it can really hinder the amount of melatonin that your body is secreting, and therefore make it more difficult for you to fall asleep. So screen time before bed does not affect your quality of sleep, but it can affect your quantity of sleep, and that it can make it more difficult to fall asleep. So that's something to be aware of. And Dr. McCool will kind of go into this further.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. So now I want to direct your attention to some of those sheets on your table. We're going to talk about how we can optimize sleep. So we learned a little bit more about the process of sleep and some of the myths about sleep. What can we do, some behaviors we can change to sleep better at night? So the first thing is get regular. So in your daily rhythm, be good to your circadian rhythm. So try to go to bed at a regularly scheduled time and wake up at a regularly scheduled time. It'll be better for your body that way. And even when you're on the weekends and on days off, it's best if you can kind of stabilize your sleep schedule that way. Now, if your work makes you have to accumulate some sleep debt, then you'll have to sleep extended periods on the weekends and time off. But as best you can, try to keep it as regular as you can. The other thing is we want to limit naps. Try to save sleeping for your long sleep period. If you have to nap, the best time that we found for you to take a nap is usually in the early afternoon, 3 o'clock. And try to limit that less than 30 minutes. So 20, 30 minutes is an optimum time for you to take that nap if you have to. But otherwise, try to save your sleep for when you go to bed. Another, like Stephanie was talking about, is limit alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, because these can disrupt your sleep. Caffeine and nicotine can make it more difficult for you, as we all know, to go to sleep. That's why we use it, probably. But alcohol, it can disrupt the quality of your sleep. She talked about that non-REM stage 2, to prolong that stage, make it so that you're not getting the full benefits of the time you're spending sleeping. So as best you can, try to limit those 4 to 6 hours from the time that you go to bed. Another thing is to remove noise and light stimulus. So try to set a time where you turn off your phone, your computer. Don't stop checking your email. Don't go onto social media or other sites like that. Just turn it all off and just give yourself some time, 15, 30 minutes, to kind of wind down and not expose yourself to anything that could keep you up longer. And there's a lot of great tools that you can put on those screens. I think Apple has one built in. There's apps that you can download to kind of warm up the screen. You want red lights, not blue lights. Blue lights have that higher frequency, so they're more intense and they stimulate that or decrease the melatonin production, whereas the red lights are a little bit softer and smoother. It's a longer wavelength. It's more gentle for your eyes. So that's why you kind of see more red light apps. Physical activity. So physical activity is great. It can help your sleep, but not right when you want to go to bed. You don't run 2 miles and then expect to sleep 5 minutes later. So give yourself some time there when you exercise, a couple hours, 4 hours before you try to go to bed. But it will increase the depth of your sleep. So you'll be getting better rest if you're able to do that in the morning or afternoon. Another thing is that the bed is for sleeping. Try to protect your bed just for sleeping and for relaxing. Don't work. Try to limit TV, eating, paying bills. Just keep it for sleep. So that way when you get to bed, your body kind of subconsciously is telling you, okay, it's time to go to bed. And then follow a pre-bed ritual. So 15 minutes for bed. Just try to do a certain thing. Some people, they like to drink warm tea, or they have some lavender sachets that you can kind of use some aromatherapy. But just try to wind down and relax. Some people talk about taking hot showers or baths. Those are good. Just don't get so hot that you're sweating and it's like a sauna, and then it keeps you up. So just something that's relaxing to you. And then try to create the right space. You don't want to sleep with the lights bright on, curtains pulled. Try to dim it down, make it quiet, calm, and kind of a soothing atmosphere for you. And try to control that space. So you can use earplugs, you can use anything to dim the lights too. And now we'll take some time here. Connie Bongiorno will come and discuss what resources we have available through the library. She's our clinical librarian, and she has a lot to offer for us.
We have some tables set up for the library resources already here, but because we have great colleagues in Duluth and Rochester and people on WebEx, we wanted to make sure we put some of the key ones on the screen so other people also have access to it. But they can contact their library, wherever site they are, and also find out more on this. On your tables, too, you have things on sleep hygiene that we printed off for you, basic tips for relaxation and some key things of where to go for sites. But I wanted to show some key ones that we're showing here today. The University of Minnesota Center for Spirituality and Healing, they have a wonderful site, and they supplied the lavender sachets for us. So they have information on sleep. They have resources, classes, coaching. They have individual assessments. They talk about diet, nutrition, and aromatherapy. So, you know, check out that site at the university. We have some rich resources here that staff can get to, and some of them, a lot of them, most of them are free, some have minimal cost to them. Also, the National Library of Medicine produces Medline Plus, a great thing to put in sleep hygiene as a subject. If you put in sleep hygiene, sleep wellness, you will get a lot of hits, and it'll talk to you, and it's more of a layman information. So this is something that your doctor might hand you, something from Medline Plus. That's why we have the librarians and the residents in the back who are at the beginning and will be here after questions, so that you can see some of these resources and how to search them. And also the Center for Disease Control. Stephanie had a wonderful thing up there about public health concern. They have actually identified sleep as a public health concern because of all the issues with car accidents, abuse. A lot of things can be traced back to poor sleep habits. So we want to stress that the CDC has some great information on that. Also, we're very fortunate today. We brought a little display here, but I wanted you to see it in other sites, the recipe. We have Lois back here from the Wagenstein Historical Library of Biology and Medicine, and she brought some sleep resources from the 1600s, sleep recipes and things like that. So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to go around and see some of these things, and for our colleagues to be able to see what's out there on this presentation. We're going to take about 10 minutes for questions, then we're going to let people go around. We have free stuff to pick out, handouts, librarians and residents, all for your questions afterwards also. So I want to bring back Stephanie and Logan. See if we have any questions here or at one of our sites that are on the WebEx.
No, actually, that's a really good question. And melatonin, oh.
How does melatonin affect your sleep?
Stand over here. So this is a question that we get a lot. This is how does melatonin affect our sleep? And usually melatonin is the first line agent that we like to use before any other sleeping agent because of its natural quality. Really, it's a natural substance, and so you can actually buy it over the counter. And it's highly recommended up to 10 milligrams of melatonin, but usually starting at around 2 milligrams for sleep. And no, it's not like Benadryl, and it's not like alcohol, in that it doesn't affect your quality of sleep. So it's a highly recommended agent. Yes?
Do you know anything about herbal tea like with malaria leaf?
No.
No, I'm not familiar about that.
Not a whole lot, no. I mean, I think that if it relaxes you and if it works, I think that's good. But I don't know what the research suggests about that.
We can help you with follow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, with the season changes, like the sun is the sun setting a lot earlier. So, how do we keep with that cycle consistent throughout the year? Because like the times that are higher,
right.
Yeah. So to keep that consistent, so we have the artificial lights like the ones here in the room. And that kind of is some external stimuli to keep your body alert, I guess, and aware that it needs to be awake. So then it's more about your ability to control that process in the time before you go to bed. So like we had talked about, getting some sort of screen dimming or limiting electronics and kind of dimming the lights as best you can. That'd be the best way with the early sunsets. Best thing to do here during this time period.
Yeah, you can actually, a lot of people don't have those. A lot of people don't have those lights at home. So like the fluorescent lights, so you can actually buy one. And some people like to sit in front of them in the evenings if they're feeling extra tired before bed. Yeah.
I have a question from online. Do you have any tips for staying asleep?
Tips for staying asleep. Well,
yeah, don't look at the clock. Don't what they say, perseverate on not sleeping. So if you are waking up in the middle of the night, it's best to get up and just kind of recognize the fact that you're not sleeping. Get up, go someplace. Don't turn on the lights. Don't turn on the TV. Don't look at your phone. Just try to be in a dim place and have some people talk about having a second room where you can go to another relaxing place that you can go to and try to restart that sleep process. But if you're just lying in bed, like one of Stephanie's slides, just lying in bed, kicking yourself that you can't go to sleep, just get up and then give yourself 20 minutes and try again.
And there are also, I want to point out that there are medications. Some are meant for staying asleep and some are meant for falling asleep. And so that's something that you would want to talk to your physician about if that was also something you were interested in.
Yep.
Just to follow up on the melatonin question, I was just wondering, what level of melatonin closely related to high quality REM sleep, or is that not so closely related?
So we recommend that you talk with your physician about it. But I'll just speak briefly. Typically use melatonin for delayed sleep onset. So if you're having trouble going to sleep, not necessarily to affect the REM cycle. So we may give you use a couple milligrams there to start that the sleep urge, to complete the sleep urge and fall asleep. Yeah.
A couple. I read somewhere that typically people go through a sleep cycle every 90 minutes. Is that true? I look at the chart and I look at maybe not, but I just want to say that's true. I've observed that oftentimes if I wake up, it's usually about 3 hours, 4 hours, so it happens that way. So I think that's true. And the other thing I wanted to speak more about is making a comment about that sleep deprived and then making it up on the weekend.
Sleep debt, yeah.
Yeah, well, so the whole cycle in 90 minutes is actually an accurate statement. However, that highly varies. It is accurate, but it's not accurate for the population in general. And the diagram that I put up there was actually the diagram of what a typical 20-some-year-old would look like. It's a lot different as we age. And so the cycles tend to be shorter and more broken up and not quite like clockwork. And then in addition, everyone's just very different. But ideally, yes, the 90-minute, yeah, Logan.
Yeah, and then the second question was about sleep debt. So if you're getting sleep deprived during the week and then trying to catch up that. So one thing Stephanie had mentioned is that the more sleep that you lose, the less your ability to recognize that you're sleep deprived. So you lose insight into your own sleep deprivation. And it can take up to 2 extended sleeps to regain baseline alertness. So if you are becoming sleep deprived during the week and it's outside your control, then you would like to, as best you can on the weekends or days off, to extend your sleep. So basically sleep without an alarm. Allow yourself to sleep and then do that until you find yourself catching sleep in the 7 to 9 hour window that is generally recommended. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I got the opposite result. I had
Yeah, and I'll repeat the question. The question was, if I've used melatonin in the past and it makes me more awake than asleep, is this something that is common, or is there something we should do about it? And again, we just recommend that you talk with your primary care doctor about that. It could be the timing of when you take the melatonin, and it could be the dose may need to be changed too. But there's also...
And to answer your question, that's not a common side effect, not one that I at least see, and I don't know if you've seen that much, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does happen, but seeing a sleep medicine doctor would be helpful because sometimes you may need to have it an hour before or an hour later, and they can work with you on that. But that's a good point that you bring up. Yes.
You talked about how every person is different. For those people that need the 8 to 10 hours more sleep than is average, in our society, that's almost impossible to do. So do you have any recommendations for someone in that kind of situation?
First of all, I think you should recognize that, so there's a couple of things. First one is recognize if you're becoming sleep deprived, that you're sleep deprived and you're not realizing it too. So you're not at your full functional level. The second thing is that we can optimize the amount of sleep that we do get. So try to use good sleep behavior and routine for the sleep that you're allowed to have. And then the third thing is that if you know that you're going to be accumulating sleep debt, then you're going to have to try to budget time to have some of that extended sleeps to kind of gain back some of that or take away some of that. But that's a very difficult, it's a difficult thing.
We were kind of talking a little before the problem and how like we don't have to sleep, we still wake up, maybe our bodies are sort of 5:30 when I get up, so on the weekend, you don't want to wake up at that time, you just do. Is there any benefit to going back to sleep? Is there quality sleep after you've already opted out in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you feel that you need to go back to sleep, absolutely. And there's a caveat to the whole catching up on your sleep debt that we're kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth in a sense because to one extent we'll say I always get up the same time on the weekend for better sleep hygiene, but then other times if you're sleep deprived, we're saying sleep a little bit longer on the weekend to catch up. So it's kind of a catch-22, and really there is benefit though to going back to sleep, yes. But yes and no, in that it can also affect down the line how you go to bed that night. Then.
Do you have like recommendations for children ages 5 to 10 who are very hard to find?
That's difficult. We have a 6-month-old, and he keeps us up too. Stephanie, what do you say?
For kids.
Yeah. So really limit the amount of screen time, especially in the middle of the night. And if you have to use the screen again, going back to those screen warmers or dimmers. So just try to limit any sort of
2 hours before bed.
Yeah. So try to limit it 2 hours before bed. If they're napping a lot during the day, try to limit those naps. We just really encourage you to use a good sleep hygiene with them.
Yeah, and that would be a question that I would ask: Are they taking naps throughout the day? Because perhaps they don't need a nap anymore. A lot of kids in that age gap are still getting naps and don't necessarily need to. It's common actually around the age of 3 to not need naps anymore, but every kid is different. Some kids need naps until they're 6. So.
When someone is prescribed sleep aid, is that sort of seen as a short-term treatment? And how long does someone take that?
Yeah, so the question is, when you're prescribed a sleep aid, is that seen as a short-term solution, or do we expect to take them long-term? Is that fair? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, again, this is something that varies. A lot of people are on sleep aids indefinitely. There's a lot of talk about, and a lot of concern that patients have about, is this addictive? Typically, a lot of sleep medications are not addictive, but some are. For example, a lot of the muscle relaxants, like the benzodiazepines, they tend to be addictive and really negatively impact your quality of sleep and aren't recommended long term. However, there are some medications like Lunesta or Zolpidem, or there's a whole bunch, but they have the disclaimer that they're not particularly addictive, but everyone's different. So yeah, some people are having a life circumstance where they just need to be on something short term to kind of get them through, and then they eventually wean off and they do fine. Other people do need to just be on something long term. There haven't been any studies that suggest that there's a negative impact, but there are a lot of studies on sleep medications mixed with other things like alcohol or other sedating medications, and there's also if you're having side effects like sleepwalking or doing odd things in your sleep, that would be a reason to not be on a medication like that.
And just one more point, and if you're on a medication and it doesn't seem like it's working, then talk with your physician to kind of wean off and try something else. Mm-hmm. Yes. In the back?
Yeah. What about mindfulness or
yeah, that's a great point. So the question was, what about using mindfulness or breathing techniques to help you get to sleep? And that's something that can be incorporated in your pre-bed ritual, is what we called it up here, but those 15, 30 minutes before you go to bed, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, it's excellent to use the mindfulness or breathing techniques. And I think, Connie, we have more information through our library.
Right, people library, and the Center for Spirituality and Healing has a lot on breathing exercises and different things like that. And we can help you with those resources also.
Mm-hmm. Quick question online. Are short days and naps minutes beneficial, detrimental, or neither?
Short day, okay, yes. So if you need to take a nap, we recommend that we're encouraging you to take it before 3 p.m. and to keep it less than 30 minutes. So yeah, 20 minutes that before 3 p.m. between that noon 3 p.m. window is a good time to take a short little nap. Yes.
How about taking melatonin?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good question. I haven't seen any long-term studies, but that's, again, something we could figure out through the library, the long-term effects of melatonin.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
Have there been any studies that look at individuals who exhibit monitoring regular REM patterns, and if there's any indicator of relates to these REM specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Connie would be the best one to help us out with that.
Yeah,
but only
with the studies and stuff, we can help you with that, Steve. So some of them you might be familiar with, just the big studies, or we can go and actually look at all the studies for you. Because you contacted the library, we can get you the studies on that. Usually when they have a really particular patient, then they contact me for those specific ones to get all the studies, but we'd be glad to help you with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have any more questions? We wanted to give you some opportunities if you haven't had a chance to go and look at some of the resources that we have, especially the History of Medicine piece. But we want to thank you all for coming and thank everybody who was on at WebEx. And thank our presenters.
Thank you.
Yeah. The time was kind of tough. But it was the time. I'm happy.
Yeah.